I'm so happy today to have Rep Cyrus Javadi here.
Yeah.
You just corrected me a second ago because I've been saying Javadi for a long time. I'm sorry about that.
Javadi has a nice Italian feel. And when I was a
Yeah.
kid in junior high living in Massachusetts, everyone thought I was Italian.
Okay.
So they'd say Javadi. But my
Javadi.
grandpa said Javadi. My dad and grandma all said Javadi. So I've said Javadi
Okay.
my whole life.
It's like rhyming with gravity.
Yeah, Javadi, gravity,
Yeah.
cavity, like a
Okay.
dentist. Yeah.
Yeah. Yeah. I was gonna say I just told you a second ago, but I think you are the first Cyrus I've met. I did have one of my first bosses when I used to work for horse races in Oregon, actually in Tillamook, was this guy named Cy Leland, who's probably no longer alive, but I only talked to him on the phone because he's from New Mexico. So this guy
Yeah.
was that was the only other one.
Yeah, I've always wondered what it would be like, when you had friends in class that were named John. There was like three Johns or Davids.
Yeah.
I've never had another Cyrus either, and I don't know. I think it would be a cool experience to meet another Cyrus someday. But other than the secretary, I think of the Treasury back in the 70s and a couple of other people I've mentioned who I've seen in the news or over the years, I've never met a Cyrus.
That's kind of incredible. Yeah.
Yeah,
It's got to feel unique. And that's what I was gonna say. I'm so happy to have you on because I feel like you just have such a unique perspective on the Oregon Legislature.
thanks.
Is one of the reasons I want to talk to you. But yeah, I just wanted if you could give people just a quick bio of yourself and your district and that kind of thing. I
Yeah.
know I actually was learning yesterday. I thought it was just Tillamook, but it's like the whole coast from Astoria and all that, right?
Yes, it is. It's House District 32. So I'm a state representative and was first elected in 2022. The district goes from the border of Tillamook County and Lincoln County to the south, and then all the way up Highway 101 until you get to Astoria and the Columbia River. Then you take a right and start heading east back to Portland and follow Highway 30 until you get to Clatskanie.
Okay.
And so that entire area, which is all of Tillamook County, all of Clatsop County, and then Clatskanie, is now House District 32. And there are 27 different towns in that district. There's
Wow.
5 school districts, 3 hospitals. There are this like the largest portion of the state forest. It's a very in an amazing tourism. So it's a huge district with a lot of natural resource, a lot of tourism, a lot of farming still, and of course a lot of fishing.
Yeah.
So a big mix of a lot of different concerns and economically as well as politically. I also work as a dentist. When I'm not in session, like right now, it tends to be 4 to 5 days a week. Usually try to stop around, sometime mid-afternoon on 2 or 3 days a week so I can go out and get to meetings around the district. And then during session, I usually only get to practice 1 day a week, so Fridays,
Hmm.
unless as we get towards the end of a legislative session when things have to get done. There's lots of deadlines. Sometimes I can't even get to the practice on a Friday, and so it's definitely a big switch going from 5 days to one, and then that transition back when
Yeah.
July hits from 1 day back to five. And then we have we've lived in Oregon since 2008. After dental school, we moved up. I have a blended family. My wife and I have 9 children.
Oh wow.
Yeah, the oldest is 26, youngest is 9 now.
Okay.
4 are in college, and we've lived in both Astoria and Tillamook, and now, yeah, well, it's been 17 years later, and I love the Oregon coast, love Oregon, and it's honestly traveling kind of all around the world. It's the best place I've ever lived or been.
Well, great. Yeah. And you're currently living in Tillamook or Astoria?
Yeah, the practice is actually in Tillamook, where I work most of the time when I'm not in session, and then we just live just south on Highway 101, just off of it, and not too far out of town.
Okay. Awesome. I was gonna say too, this may be dumb, but being open on a Friday it seems cool because for whatever reason my dentist up here was always Monday through Thursday. I
Yeah,
don't know what that's about, but
yeah. Dentists like to they like their 3 day weekends. Actually, you
I
know what it is? It's
yeah.
the staff that like their 3 day weekends,
Yeah.
and so it's really difficult to find staff that want to work a Friday. And even if dentists, as a dentist gets older, they have less and less student debt, and so they can afford to work a little bit less.
Hmm.
And so, of course, they want to as they get older, but but it's also a matter of finding staff that want to pick up that fifth day.
Yeah.
And dental hygienists don't want to work
The
5 days a
hygienist, the
week.
receptionist, all those
Hygienists,
people.
receptionists,
Yeah.
yeah, dental assistants.
Okay. Very cool. Yeah, I was gonna ask you, and I'm sure you've been asked a million times. I think I saw you on TV talking about it, but when you did switch parties was a couple months ago.
Yeah, September 5th.
Just tell me about that, why you made that decision. As much as you want to say about that. Yeah.
Yeah, I made the decision because I felt like the Republican Party was changing. Their politics were changing. The things they wanted to focus on were changing. It didn't really align with who I was. I grew up in Utah, a couple other places around the country after my mom and dad split, but grew up in a member of the Mormon Church. I grew up in a very conservative neighborhoods, conservative family values, conservative states, conservative schools. I went to Brigham Young University. I studied accounting there. And so everything in my upbringing was very fit more neatly at the time into what I felt was the Republican Party. Not being hyper political as a kid or even as a young adult, I wouldn't be able to say, well, this and that, but just in general, that was my frame of reference. My parents were never very political, but friends and teachers, etc. Um, and so I ultimately aligned myself with the Republican Party when it was time to choose. What I've seen though over the last, I'd say roughly 5 to 10 years, is a slow shift, and it maybe in the last few years, even a couple years, a more rapid shift away from just values that I think are important. And so on one level, it was what's happening with the party, what's happening nationally, right? Do I still believe and support some of those things? I don't think everything's changed about the Republican Party, but some significant things have. And whether it's fiscal responsibility or whether it's their posture towards LGBTQ or whether it's their foreign policy, their policy towards healthcare, towards the most vulnerable among us, towards the rule of law, due process, right? All these things that we keep talking about in the news or on social media. On the other hand, there was some stuff happening just within the state capitol that I was concerned about. We had some big issues last session. We talked about Medicaid. We talked about rural hospitals. We talked about transportation was a huge thing, right? We talked about books in schools. What kind of material should our kids have access to? We talked about minority communities. I kept finding myself on the other side of those issues from the Republican Party. Especially, one thing I didn't mention about the district that I serve in, it's a pretty purple district in the
Mm-hmm.
state.
Mm-hmm.
Got a good mix of Republican, Democrats. The largest part of that group are non-affiliated voters, 47%. No, it's wrong. It's about 37 to 40% are non-affiliated voters. So a big mix of different values, and I represented all of those people. And we were talking about these issues that were important to the district. How do we get money for infrastructure? How do we make sure our hospitals stay open? How do we make sure our kids have access to materials they need? And my own party was fighting and working against those priorities. And I think when you get into politics, you have an obligation to be authentic, to represent the people in your district, but also to represent where your values are and what you think really is the best interest, regardless of what the political consequences are.
Mm.
And so I made the decision ultimately to change because I felt like the Democratic Party, through a variety of experiences I've had in the state capitol, but also just nationally, was more aligned with my values and what the issues and priorities I wanted to work on, as well as just solving problems. And so I decided to switch just after. I was thinking about it just after the end of the long session in June on what my future in the party was, whether I should hope or wait for the party maybe to change. Parties do change.
Mm-hmm.
They're not static. They tend to try to respond to what's happening and to those problems and tie those to their core values and principles. But those can shift a little bit, which is good, right? We don't have slavery anymore. We don't want a party that still is pro-slavery. So the Democrat and Republican parties of 2025 don't look like the Democrat and Republican parties of 1865.
Mm-hmm.
And so that's okay. I'm all right with some shift in migration, but as a person, as a politician, but as also a citizen of Oregon, I feel like As I change too, and people do change, it's important to be aligned in a way that fits more naturally. And so I thought about it for a good couple of months, more privately than anything. It's not something that you take lightly.
Yeah.
You don't want to do it for the wrong reasons. It's not, it shouldn't be about ambition. It shouldn't be about opportunity. It should be focused on the right things. Should I even continue in politics? Should I get out?
Mm-hmm.
Is it too partisan, too divided? And, but I put that all on the back burner while I thought about what we were going to do about transportation, which was a huge deal. And we got to September. We had the vote, and then I had the headspace to really think about. Well, I mean, I had been thinking about it in the back burner, on the back burner, but now it's time to really move it to the front burner. What should I do? And Oregon has some laws about when you can change parties.
Oh, really?
Yeah,
Okay.
and you have to do it by certain dates and times,
Huh.
and you have to also, and so I found out on September 1st, which was the day we pretty much voted, or we voted on the transportation bill on September 1st. Uh, then found out I had 3 days if I was going to change my registration,
Mm.
so that I could run for office again, and decided now was the time. And
Oh, I see. So you had 3 days. Otherwise, you would have had to run as a Republican. Is that
yeah,
kind of
you'd
what
have
you're
to
saying?
run
Yeah,
still as a
I
Republican,
see.
or get out of the game
Okay.
altogether. And so already having put some thought into it, knowing what I wanted to do, now it's just a matter of timing and getting ready for. In some ways, I wasn't quite ready to for all of the attention that it was going to get.
Yeah.
Looking back on it, I might have preferred 2 or 3 weeks to kind of just be prepared for whatever might happen, because you don't know. It could have been a blip, or it could have gotten as much attention as it did.
Mm-hmm.
But overall, really happy with how it went. Very happy with my decision and where I'm at now. And it's not because I've really changed my values and principles. I'm still essentially the same guy I was, 3 years ago or a year ago.
Mm-hmm.
I've shifted a little on some things as I've learned more, but ultimately still the same. But I feel like the party has had more of a shift and away from where who I am and what I want, like I said. So
For
that's
sure.
that
Yeah.
that is the switch in a nutshell.
Okay. Yeah, I was thinking, it's funny because people bring up the NAV stuff all the time, the non-affiliated voter, and it's, people have explained on here about, the motor voter law automatically enrolls people, and that's why
Mhm.
we have this huge percentage, and I think it's even bigger in the state. I think it's like, I don't want to say, I don't know, 40 something percent. There's a large percentage of them, but I was just gonna ask, like, if you could be a non-affiliated elected, would you basically be that? Because you seem like somebody who's very much in the middle.
Yeah,
Um,
good question.
Not that that's like a possibility, but I mean,
Yeah, I think what is at the heart there, there are what we really want out of our politicians are independent thinkers.
mhm,
But I think that's different than party alignment. Uh, Oregonians and I think Americans, and that's probably not even unique to America, want um, people who are going to go to go to the capital, the seats of government, think about things dispassionately, without bias, and try to really dig into and figure out how to solve problems. But over time, what we've seen is strategies on how to maintain power.
mhm,
So the main job should be governing. The side job should be figuring out how to build, how to, win elections, right? But I think we've inversed that. So the main job has become how do we keep our power, and the side job is how do we figure out how to solve this problem, and that tends to create partisanship in every part of the process from the moment you decide to run, even if you're not running. Look at social media, all the way up to the highest levels of government. And so, on one level, we want independent thinkers. We don't really want people who are going to just toe the party line. Um, we get maybe why there has some advantages to doing that. On the other hand, we still need parties. Parties do provide some structure that allows for collaboration, for working together on things, especially when there's shared values and similar beliefs. But that should not be that should be the salt on the meat, not
Mm,
the meat itself. Too much of it and you've ruined your meal. Too little of it's pretty bland. I think in a perfect world, we'd have 90 independent legislators not tied to any parties, but somehow building coalitions with each other. We don't live in that world. James Madison saw that back at the beginning of the founders. He was anti-party. He saw Alexander Hamilton taking advantage of what a party could do and knew that unless there was a strong opposition party to what Alexander Hamilton was up to, there would be no stopping Alexander Hamilton, and ultimately could lead to tyranny when you have a one party rule.
mm,
Ultimately have a tyrannical rule because you don't have any factions working against each other. And so he, along with Jefferson, start the Democratic Republican Party back then. And I think with some regret, but also with understanding that parties can be a force for good as long as the party it stays subjected to the independentness of its members and ultimately to the voters who should demand that their representatives are putting the Constitution first, the needs of the country first, the greater good first, and not keeping their jobs or their partisanship, etc.
mm. Yeah, I was like, curious when you say that because a lot of people who come on here talk about the one party rule in Oregon. Do you see that as an issue here in Oregon?
I think one party rule, yeah, at its core is a bad. Do I think we've had one party rule in Oregon? We've had a Democratic governor in the mansion, I believe, since late
80s? Yeah, I
80s.
think it was in the 80s sometime. Yeah.
But we haven't had one party rule in the legislature since the late 80s. We've
Yeah.
had Republicans up until the mid 2000s. By 2010, we have a 30-30 split, so it's even. In fact, we have dual speakers of the House at that point.
Mm-hmm.
So it's really been the last 15 years where you've had the Democrats in charge. I think that's far less time than you've seen a lot of other states where
Sure,
they've got
sure.
one party rule. I think Texas is an example of where you've got basically one party rule. Do we have tyranny in Texas? No. But you do have a minority in both situations, whether it's Oregon or Texas, where they um, they get frustrated because their agenda isn't always the agenda that moves forward,
Mm-hmm.
and I think they would prefer to have more of a bite at the apple. But I think that being said, the minority's job is to um, really twofold. It's to participate in the conversation, right? Still bring those voices, and a good governing party, a good majority party, whether it's Texas or whether it's a blue state or a red state, should make sure they're at the table and they're considering those because you still had almost 45 to 50% of the state of Oregon that did vote for minority party electeds and for minority, which represent their agenda items.
Mm-hmm.
So it's still a good chunk of the state. And I think that you, a good governance involves bringing them to the table, letting them talk, uh, and also making sure that those, not giving up, making sure that those issues, whether it's transportation bill, whether it's female reproductive rights, taxes, housing, that they're still raising the flags on those issues so that people do have a voice. That doesn't mean they're going to win, but they also shouldn't be silent. They should still have those debates and conversations,
Mm-hmm.
and face the fact that they're going to lose sometimes. And it goes, that sword cuts both ways.
Right,
Sometimes
right.
when the majority power party loses power, they're going to be on the other side of that, still needing to work to on solving those same problems.
For sure. Yeah, no, it's really interesting. I was gonna see, yeah, along the same lines, like, is there anything you want to say about just the legislature as a whole? A lot of people have said we need to change like our primaries to
Yeah,
go to open primaries in Oregon.
yeah.
And it seems like that's kind of what we were just talking about with all this kind of non-affiliated stuff. Like, would you support that? Do you see the legislature as too partisan on both sides?
There are elements of it, right, that are too partisan. And not Oregon alone. Every state's gerrymandered, right? We've created districts that tend to, or geographic areas that we call districts, um, where we concentrate voters. of a
Hmm.
certain party,
Yeah.
and that does both parties do it, and that does protect their advantages, right, and their power. In Oregon, we've done that, and do I think the Oregon legislature is too partisan? Like
Or just like you see, yeah, like are there any issues, I guess, that you see with as far as that stuff with the legislature?
yeah, I think we've got some work to do there because you basically create factions within Oregon's government where you've got people who are coming from very partisan districts who are going to align with each other. Whether it's Republican partisan districts or Democratic partisan districts, they're responding to their voters who have tend to have more partisan issues. One of the things that creates that is because we have a primary system, and you talked about open primaries versus non-open primaries. During the primary system, we get a fraction of the voters to weigh in on who the candidates are going to be. They tend to be the voters who are paying the most attention to party politics.
Hmm.
They can only vote for their party candidates. The other voters, the non-affiliated voters, right, who make a almost 50% block of patients, even in our most partisan districts. Think about that, like Josephine County or
Hmm.
some of our redder districts and then our bluer districts, they do have more Democratic voters than Republican voters and vice versa, depending on the district, but they still have a massive amount of non-affiliated voters
Hmm.
who can't vote at all during a primary. They have no say in who the candidates are. That means as a candidate, your main job is to message to the voters who are going to be able to vote, which happen to be the most partisan of the
Right,
voters.
right.
So you get elected or selected by the base, these more partisan candidates. If they win the primary election, they go on to the general, but there's not really a challenge in the general. Now the non-affiliated voters really only have, one choice, right? They've got to pick um, between a most partisan candidates. So my suggestion is we change that. I think for two reasons. One, non-affiliated voters or all voters should have a say in who their candidates are. And when we do that, it means that the second part of it is that the candidates now have to message and appeal to voters who aren't their base.
Right, right.
And so the
The
bill, go
sort of
ahead.
less extreme
Yeah,
block of
right.
voters.
Now
Yeah.
you can't just say whatever the issue is to get your base riled up and knowing that you can ignore almost 50% of your district
Hmm.
or more. Now you have to appeal to everybody. And so I'm going to introduce a bill
Yeah, I was gonna say
that,
you got a bill for
yeah,
this.
I
Yeah.
do. In the short session, the bill will create a system where every voter in the state gets a ballot during the primary. They will be able to choose when, let's say it's for state representative or state senator, they can choose anybody on the ballot who's running for that office. Doesn't matter if they're a Democrat, Republican, Independent, Libertarian, you name it. But they only get to vote for one state representative, one state senator, regardless of party. The county clerks will add up all the votes. The Democrat with the most votes advances to the general. The Republican with the most votes also advances.
Okay. Okay.
And then a third party candidate, if they meet a certain threshold, would also advance. So you're always guaranteed at least one candidate from each of the major parties. You'll never have a situation where you have two Democrats or two
Right.
Republicans.
You're just opening that up
You're
to
opening it up and you're limiting it to the top two. Now, every primary voter, non affiliated Republican, Democrat, if you're a Republican and you don't like who your choice is, you think they're too extreme, you have the option to vote for anybody else. You could vote for a Democrat if you wanted to, vice versa. You're a non affiliated voter, same thing. And I think by doing that, you're forcing candidates to consider a much bigger populace. We often see candidates pivot from very extreme rhetoric during primary campaigns to more
hmm.
moderate
Right,
rhetoric
right.
during the general for that reason. You see it at the presidential level and it trickles all the way down to the state and local levels. And so I'm hopeful about this bill. We've polled voters on it. 68% of voters love the
Yeah,
idea and would
yeah.
consider it and vote for it. We're also at the same time advancing a ballot initiative, right?
Okay, okay.
So we're going to try the process through the legislature.
Both ways, yeah.
Yep. And if this one fails, whatever, we have our ballot initiative. If this one passes, we'll stop the ballot initiative. But
Gotcha.
we'll try both tracks. It means a lot of work for our ballot initiative process, which I'm not a part of. I'm spearheading the legislative side of it. There's a lot of work to do. It's a big change, and the major parties will have to vet it and make sure it's makes sense for them. And so we'll see what the ultimate outcome is.
Yeah. No, I
Yeah.
think that's a great
Yeah.
bill. I mean, it sounds like a great bill.
Yeah, I think it's just the more involvement we get, the more democratic the process is, the better.
Right.
I get on the one hand, some people will argue, well, Republicans should get to pick who their candidate is. Democrats should get to pick theirs. We shouldn't have non-party members deciding. But I think because those candidates go on to represent everybody, everybody should have a say.
Yeah. I would also argue that because of the way the motor voter law works, that's also a reason to
Yeah,
like we
absolutely.
have all these NAV voters by default, and they need to be able to do
Yeah,
candidate selection
right.
when now they can't in the
Yeah,
current law. So um, that's great. Yeah, I want to go back to the ODOT bill for a second.
sure.
I've had a lot of people on here talking about it.
Yeah,
Um, I wanted to first of all, like, just tell me a little bit about what that was like voting on that, why it was so important, and also I wanted to get your take on this effort to put that on the ballot and let people
sure.
vote on it, on at least the tax increase
Yeah,
part.
absolutely. Let's talk all about it as much as you want. All right. There are 78,000 miles of road in the state of Oregon. And the way that we fund the upkeep of those roads, as well as major repairs, and we'll put those in two separate pots because they really are different. By upkeep, I mean potholes, fog lines, uh, gravel, brush overgrowing, landslides, snow removal, you name it. That's in
General
our upkeep.
maintenance,
Yep.
yeah,
Then you have major road repairs where a big flood washes out a chunk of the road, a bridge crumbles into the abyss.
and
You
this
name,
this is probably stuff you see on the coast.
oh my gosh,
Yeah,
every winter.
yeah,
So you got those two main buckets. We have 78,000 miles of road we have to cover. The way that we do that in Oregon is through the gas tax. And you go to the pump. Right now, you're going to pay 40 cents per gallon. Of that 40 cents per gallon, half of it stays inside the state's budget for them to spend on state highways and interstates. And then you have half of the budget goes to counties and cities to cover county and city roads. Whereas you have two crews, you have the state union workers who work for ODOT, and
mhm.
some of them are non-union workers as well, but all of the ODOT workers are doing state highway maintenance.
So
And
if
then
you
you,
see like a ODOT station,
yeah,
that's what
that's
you're
what
talking
they're doing.
about.
They're
Yeah,
taking care of Highway 101, Highway 26, I-5, you name it, right? Because the feds don't have a maintenance crew.
hmm,
They contract with us. Then you have all your local guys who work for the county and the city who are out there making sure your city streets are cleaned and patched. Road signs are in the right place, etc. Um,
I know, and a good example of that here is Peabot during this whole session was like they were just like suddenly out of all this money, and that's kind of what you're talking about, your local
yeah,
transportation department.
they're getting their money primarily from the gas tax, and some of that math works out to be where was the gas purchased and how many cars are registered in the zip code or the city or the county where you want the money.
Mm,
So even though 50% is going to cities and counties, it goes into a much larger pot first, right? All cities and counties, and then the math takes over and says, well, hey, there's 10,000 cars in this district. We're going to put that much money over here, right? So that doesn't do a good job of accounting for things like tourism impacts. So along the Oregon coast, we get millions of visitors every year driving their
right,
cars.
because you're only talking registered vehicles of
Right.
residents.
Yeah, exactly. So we have 40, there are about 40,000 people that live in Clatsop County, just over that. There's just over 20,000 people in Tillamook County. You have 60,000 people, not 60,000 drivers. But you have all of the traffic that comes from all over the world using those same roads, but
Mhm.
we only still get the portion of the money that's allocated based on those math formulas from 50% of the gas tax, which is 20 cents. Uh, the state level, a little bit different. You have 20 cents, and their money has to also go towards things like major road repairs and upkeep. And then some goes to public transit. So we found ourselves over the last couple of years in a spot where we were falling behind on taking care of all the things. Both the city and the counties were falling behind on being able to take care of roads, both major repairs and maintenance, and the state was too. And so the problem was, well, what do we do about it? Why are we even in this problem? Why are we falling behind? Well, since 2020, the cost of everything has gone up. Now, when you start looking at costs and how they impact things, almost 80% of costs are attributed to payroll and materials, so steel, concrete, asphalt. That leaves you about 20% for other stuff like regulatory things that we that the state might come up with, or project creep, for example, right? So we saw all of these costs increasing. Meanwhile, the way we pay for it, the tax, is tied directly to how many gallons of fuel are purchased.
Hmm.
Oregon purchases about $1.5 billion, 5 billion gallons of fuel every year. So take 1.5 billion, multiply it by the gas tax, and that gives you roughly how much money Oregon's pulling in to take care of all their roads. If we buy more gas, more revenue comes in. If we buy less gas, less revenue. Same number of miles driven, though, right? Cars are still driving, it's just as far. But two things have occurred over the last 10 to 15 years. Electric vehicles use no gas, also don't contribute really substantially prior to this bill towards
Right.
towards that budget.
Yeah.
And then the other thing is, over the last 10 to 15 years, is just fuel efficiency of our cars, right? They need less fuel to go just as far. So we've seen the number of gallons of fuel tick down.
Right. You need to
M-
buy less because of
You buy
increased
less.
efficiency. Yeah.
Same time, costs are increasing. And I'm not talking about the cost of the I-5 Rose Quarter project, the I-5 bridge replacement, the Abernathy Bridge. Those have mushroomed, and we'll put those aside for a second. But just the cost of maintaining things as they are, so that we have clean and safe roads to drive on, which, by the way, as Oregonians, when we talk about transportation, their number one concern is the roads should be safe and drivable. Those costs have increased. At the same time, revenue has gone down. So we can't pay the bills. The way we would pay the bills is fire people, lay them off, right? Okay, we need less labor. Great, now we've brought the payroll budget down. We need less material. We'll use worse materials. We'll use bad equipment, whatever we need. Let's see if we can just bring stuff down. That's another way we could do it. You could also, so you could cut the staff who are actually out on the roads doing things, that are getting up at 3 a.m. in the morning to go make sure that that rock slide that just occurred is cleared before everybody else wakes up to get to work.
Hmm.
Or whether it's plowing roads. In Astoria, when we get ice storms and snowstorms, that entire city comes to a standstill because so much of it's on a hill. So we have to wait for ODOT to get those roads clean for us, and the snow removed. So we've got we either lay those people off or we lay off top management. And there's a lot. So here's where I think people started to get really worked up. And some of it's just the rhetoric coming from the opponents to the transportation packages. Hey, we don't trust ODOT, right? They screwed up. Somehow they messed up $1 billion.
Hmm.
Who's really running things over there? You have drivers who are sitting in the same traffic jams they've been sitting in for the last 20 years. They see the same cones out there. They're hitting the same potholes they've been hitting. The same road is sliding off. So there is a perception, and it's not unearned, that the agency could be doing a lot better. And yet and so we should just change that. Maybe we should fire all those engineers. Maybe we should fire those managers. And then that would save some money. And then you've also gotten a third bucket, all the little extras that are policy decisions, like diversity, equity, inclusion hiring, bike lanes,
Hmm. Hmm.
things like that. And and so we could cut some of that stuff. So we could cut major road repairs, we could cut personnel, we could cut programs, and we could then bring down the cost of running the department and maintaining those roads. It'd be kind of like putting bad parts or cheaper parts in your car or cheaper parts in your computer or whatever else, and hoping you can get it by for a little while. The But we can raise revenue, or we could do a combination of both. The original plan back in the long session was to do a lot more than we did, right? It
Hmm.
was to kind of
Yeah.
like beef up all these different areas, do some cuts, but or move stuff around so that we were prioritizing things differently. And that failed. We didn't get it there.
Yeah.
Didn't
It's
have the
been
support.
significantly pared down from
Yeah.
what it was at some point.
So having seen that fail, and the monumental task that that one was, the governor and the Democrats came back and said, let's just do at least what we need to keep the roads safe and drivable. We can't change how many gallons people are going to buy. We
Hmm.
can't force them to go to the pump. We also really can't pay people less, because there's a job market out there that demands that, if you're not getting paid enough at ODOT, you'll go somewhere else. I know you lose all the experience and the expertise that comes from whether it's the guys running the machinery on Highway 101 or whether it's the engineers. And so the point was, let's we won't fill every position that's open, so we won't expand our workforce within ODOT, but let's not cut it. And when they looked at the math for that, it was 6 cents per gallon in order to keep things going and to move things forward through this winter and possibly the next 3 winters after it. And the impact was going to be about $2.50 per Oregonian, 2 drives. So
Per you saying per like
per
fill up
month, no, per
per
month,
month? Okay.
right? So you buy 6 cents a gallon. The average Oregonian drives about 12,000 miles in a year, so 1,000 a month. And if you assume that the average Oregonian gets 25 miles per gallon of their car, which is actually lower than what the average is right now, you'd see about a $2.50 impact, $2.80 depending on the actual fill up per month, right? The um, the 6 cents would be split. Half of it would be going to cities and counties. Half of it would be staying in the state of Oregon, and that was the bill that we decided to move forward. And so there were some other parts to it as well. There was a registration, a DMV fee.
Hmm.
The registration fees included, or DMV fees that included registration fees and title fees. A title fee you pay only when you buy a new car, or
Right.
right.
Exchange a title or
Registration
something.
fees you do every year. Back on that 6 cents, something I was going to point out. Like I said, we have 78,000 miles of road, right? We buy $1.5 billion of gallons of fuel per year. 6 cents works out to be about 90 million bucks, roughly. $90 million per year divided by 78,000 miles of road is about $1,000 per mile, is how much we spend to maintain those miles. Not every mile is maintained, but we also have not all the costs are the same. You have paint, of course, but getting the equipment out there to maintain, making sure the equipment's ready to go, the maintained, pay the employees, plow things, fill potholes, cut back brush. When you look at it that way, 1,000 miles $1,000 per mile puts it into context how much is really going towards just that portion of it. We say, the opponents will say, hey, it was a $4.3 billion tax. Sure. But then they'll focus on the 6 cents. And then you say, well, it's really $1,000 per mile. And roads cost, they're a fortune.
Right. Yeah, $1,000 is not
No, it's
really gonna do a lot for.
yeah, and it's only, that's and if you spread that out over, that's for 10 years. So we're assuming the costs aren't going to increase for 10 years. That's ludicrous. The
Right.
last 10
Right.
years they've exploded. We can assume, even with conservative estimates of 4 to 6% inflation, within 4 years, so 2 biennium, our costs again will have outpaced the
Hmm.
current funding level. We'll be kind of back in the same spot that we're in, and meaning we won't have enough revenue, but we'll still have the same miles driven. We're gonna have to come back and revisit this again.
Yeah. Well, that's what I was saying. I've heard from people that like this is just one of a series of bills that may
Yeah.
come through the pipeline. Is that kind of
Yeah,
what you're saying?
it's true.
Yeah.
Here's the thing. Oregon only funds their transportation network off the backs of the fuel tax. Take Utah, for example. Utah funds it off of a combination of a gas tax and sales tax and
Hmm.
property tax. Take North Carolina. North Carolina has the same exact fuel tax that we do. They fund theirs off of a sales tax, a gas
Yeah. Well,
tax,
yeah.
right?
And Oregon's one of the, I would say, few states in the country that doesn't have a sales tax,
No
and
sales
that's
tax.
explains why we have all these other taxes.
Right. Take the transit tax, for example, the statewide payroll transit tax, 0.1% right now.
Yeah.
Every $1,000 you earn cost you $1, right, out of your paycheck. We're going to raise that to 0.2%. So now for every $1,000 you earn, you're going to pay $2. The average Oregonian makes $5,000 a month. That's the median income or the median income is not the average, but the median income is about $62,000 a year. $5,000 a month, you're spending $10 a month on public transportation if you're average income. If you're the poorest among us, you're making $12,000 a year, you're spending $1 a month, right? And that goes to the payroll transit tax. When that tax was presented, it was presented as, hey, we're doubling the payroll tax. What the opponent said, I had people writing to me an email saying, I'm not going to be able to afford my mortgage. Because what they heard was all of my payroll taxes that I pay to the state and the feds are going to go up. I double, which is thousands of dollars for some people. And so we had to reframe that, and we have more work to do there. We're talking about $1 to $10 a month, depending on the individual, which for some people is still a lot, especially if you're making $12,000 a
Yeah.
year.
Well, and I was gonna say, here, at least in the Portland area, that's one line item on your pay
Yeah,
stub, but there's also a TriMet tax. There's
yeah,
separate ones that do add up, and
sure.
for some people, I always point to this recent thing the Oregonian did. Like a large majority of Oregonians can't afford a $400 emergency
They can't.
cost.
Yeah, it's
So,
true.
I just try to point out like there are these things that kind of start to add up. When you
Hmm.
look at them one at a time, it is kind of like, well, it's only a dollar here, a dollar
Sure.
there. But I think for me, the ones that I really focus on are the pay stub ones,
Yeah.
like the payroll tax. And yeah, I think for a lot of people, it's digestible, but it is also a new tax for people that.
Nobody loves taxes, I'll tell you
Yeah,
that. Not
yeah,
after that bill passed, nobody was, banging champagne glasses
right,
together. They
right.
were like, "Oh my gosh, dang it, I can't believe we have to do this." On transit, I think what's important too to frame that. In 2024, there were 100 million public transit rides in the state of Oregon.
Hmm.
100 million. Now there are 65 million of those happened in the Portland metro area.
Yeah, it's about
Um,
2/3 of that.
yeah,
Yeah.
the other 35 million happened outside the Portland metro area. Of that, now there are 4.3 million people who live in the state of Oregon, roughly. So total last year, the average Oregonian rode public transit 4 times. Now, not every member of every Oregon did that, but that puts it into context. 4 rides for the entire year. Like I said, the $12,000 a month earner is spending $1. The $60,000 a year worker is spending was spending $5 right now. I think one of the things that really struck me as I thought about that tax was that um, how much of a benefit that provides to so many communities for such in that spread out over the entire base of the taxpayers at 100 million. Every state has a public transportation system. Oregon is unique in that it's the only state that puts it on the payroll as a line item, like you said. Now, one of the things I like about that is you and I can see what it is, and we know exactly how much is going to public transportation. You take states like Utah and North Carolina again, that are good comparables. Utah funds their public transportation through a payroll tax, not payroll tax, sorry, a sales tax,
Hmm.
the gas tax, and property tax. Right? We do have a gas tax, but we don't use any of our gas tax for public transportation. We have a we have the so we don't have a sales tax. Utah does. Look at North Carolina. Same exact thing: gas tax, sales tax, property tax. We don't take any money out of property taxes. We don't have a sales tax. All of it comes out of that payroll tax, which is 0.1 to 0.2%. Regardless of where that money is, whether you see it as a line item on your pay stub or whether it gets buried in a property tax statement or whether it gets buried in a sales tax, which you would never see where it's going. There's something to be said for the transparency, but also I think importantly, the cost would still be there. The only way we get rid of the cost of a public transportation system is to get rid of public transportation or do less of it. But there are, like I said, 100 million rides last year. Those are people for a variety of reasons that needed to use public transportation.
Hmm.
Maybe they're green energy warriors, but a lot of them aren't. A lot of them are just like, that's it. That's how I get
Yeah,
from A to B.
yeah.
And we talk a lot in this state about needing more affordable housing. People who live in affordable housing need access to public transportation as one of the ways to get around. And often affordable housing is located close to metro areas, but in rural communities, affordable housing may be a 15 or 20-mile ride
Hmm.
from where you need to go. And when I was a young married guy, going to school. I lived maybe 5 miles from campus. We had one car for the family
Hmm.
that stayed at home. So if they needed it for the kids or whatever, that could be taken care of. It was up to me to figure out how to get to school. I could walk or I could ride the bus. And then when I had to get to work, it was the bus again. So there are people who, with limited resources, who need it. There are people who can't drive for a variety of reasons. Maybe they have seizures, health issues. Maybe they're blind. Maybe they're just older. They can't afford Ubers and Lyfts or ride shares of that nature. And so I think we need it. It's always going to be around. There's no getting rid of it, which means we've got to figure out a way to fund it. And I think point one to point, it was going to be 0.3%. We settled on 0.2%. There's a sunset on that for us to reevaluate it in 2 years. Again, we're not going to get to 2 years from now and be like, hey, let's cut 0.1% back down. But I think what we could do is say, hey, you know, Lane County, we see that you've got much greater transportation needs. Go if you want to raise yours to 0.3%, ask the voters in Lane County.
Mm.
And then maybe we look at
It's like a more
yeah, we
individualized
look at
kind of
somewhere in
thing.
Eastern Oregon where maybe they have one bus route all day, but they're collecting 0.2%, and they don't want that burden on their taxpayers. They
Hmm.
can cut it down to 0.1 or to zero. Like if we give communities that flexibility, I think that's real democracy. That's real
Yeah. I mean, I'd be more
local
open to
control.
that. I was
Right.
gonna say because one of the things I was just gonna bring up is I bring it up all the time on the show is like I've lived in Portland for 20 years and TriMet ridership has been not near the 2017 level or 2019 level. It has not even been close to that. So it's like I just look at it as like why, TriMet's somebody that gets a third of their money from the federal government. They get ride fees, obviously, or their fare fees, and then they get money from the state. So it's like why reward a system that isn't even increasing ridership, first of all?
Yeah.
But like I don't know, it just seems like it's propping up a system that isn't being used. And the other thing I think about a lot, I'm curious your take on this, like this remote culture we have now. Like I used to ride Tramit to work all the time, but nowadays people work so much remote work that I think that's why people aren't using transit. Like there's just this general culture of like
Sure.
staying at
Yeah.
home in general,
Yeah.
and I'm not blaming that. I'm just saying that's like where it is. So like why fight against this natural place that we got to through COVID and remote work and
I think you're on the right. I think I agree. You're thinking about it right, and that is, if there's less ridership, or we perceive there's less ridership, then why do we
yeah, or just
continue to
have an
fund it?
appropriate amount. Like it
Yeah.
just seems like if you're giving that too much money, it signals that they're doing great as far as numbers.
Yeah.
When that's the watermark was way higher back in the day,
Yeah.
So I don't know.
Well, when you look at, it's a good question. I was going to say, when you look at, I was up in Clatsop County last night, up near Astoria, and went to their transit district. They just bought a new bus,
Yeah.
and $150,000 for the bus,
Mm.
and but as we were standing there talking, he said, we don't have enough drivers to fill all the shifts. We have a demand from the population to go to additional routes so they can get to their jobs, but we don't have the means to do it. And we need to, because people need it for whether it's to get to the community college or to their jobs or to connect people with healthcare. Um, Sometimes we have to invest in solutions that we don't get the most juice out of the squeeze, even in private industry. So, like in my dental practice, not everybody who comes in needs to have a dental implant, but occasionally you're going to lose a tooth and you're going to want that have that tooth replaced. Well, the standard of care, the rules that I need to follow to provide high quality care say I have to have a really good idea of where to put that implant and what size implant, and to make sure I don't pinch any nerves or strike any blood vessels or hit any additional teeth, I need a really good x-ray. And now the technology has created it where we need a three-dimensional x-ray so we can see everything.
Mm.
That piece of equipment when I bought it was $150,000. I there is no amount of return on investment that makes that pencil out. I would love if that thing was cranking every 5 minutes, right? But it doesn't. That's not the world that we live in. In fact, in the real good world, no one would lose their teeth and I wouldn't need to do a dental
Right.
implant,
Mm.
but I have to for people. And so it's there because at some point I'm going to need it, or I have to tell those patients, sorry, you got to go to somebody else, whether they're local or not, or maybe you got to drive 2 hours now to get to that person. So just the facts on the ground demand that it's there. It's 150,000. How do I pay for it? I have to spread the cost of that thing across every service that I do. So in general, all the fees have to go up a little bit
Mm.
to cover the cost of having the right equipment, having the right personnel, having the right staff, even if the one purpose I had to buy that thing for isn't going to justify the cost of it itself. And in public transportation, while not everybody is riding the bus, and maybe it's not being going as far as it's supposed to, enough people are using it to get to their jobs, to get to school, to get to the grocery store and healthcare. It keeps the whole economy, a big chunk of it, not the whole one, but going, right? Now people can get to their job to provide goods and services. They can get to school to improve their education and their learning. They can get to healthcare, the doctors to stay healthy and not such a drain on the whole system. Without it, we still have the costs. We still feel the cost of all of those different things not working the way they're supposed to work, which is ultimately paid by the taxpayer. We're going to pay through it through higher taxes. We're going to pay through it through higher premiums. We're going to pay for it through higher wages. We're going to pay for it through all sorts of things. We're just shifting costs around because we're not really changing costs. Now, to your point, if the entire economy went to remote work and we absolutely needed no transportation needs at all and nobody needed to use it, now we're headed down the path of, do we still need this thing? Kind of like, do we still need horse and buggies in 2025? No, but did we need them in 1900? Sure. And there may come a day where we don't need public transportation in some
Yeah.
in some
Well,
way.
I was gonna say I'm definitely not saying we don't need it at all, but it
Yeah,
just seems like, at least in Portland, TriMet built to a capacity that is just not being used anymore. But what I would say, I don't know if you'd agree with this, is like I'd almost, because I see a need for what you're talking about in more in the rural
sure.
communities. And in Portland, I feel like we have this infrastructure that we've spent a lot of money on with light
Yeah.
rail and buses and
Yeah.
all this. And it's good. It's fine.
Yeah.
Like the capacity's there. They're actually cutting bus lines still because of that. But because like I said, ridership's down. But what do you think about that? Like, because I like what you said about having this patchwork. Let's see what the counties
Yeah.
need at
Yeah.
an individual level. Because there may be more of a rural need than a metro need right
Yeah.
now as far as investment.
Interestingly, to your point, and you're right. I think two things. One, you're right that there needs to be more accountability. Did Portland overbuild? Are we being the most efficient with the money? That has to stay on the table. It has to be one of the conversations we're always having as lawmakers and as agencies, and is to make sure we're using the public dollars right. And when we don't,
Because do you hear that in your community? Like, we don't want to pay
yeah,
for Portland's transportation.
it's true. But here's the thing. Here's the crazy thing, and let's like kind of look at this from a different angle. Um, Rural communities absolutely need public transportation.
Hmm.
They cannot afford the public transportation infrastructure if it was just limited to the money that they could raise locally.
Right, right.
So it's interesting because most of the opposition votes were from rural legislators, Republicans who don't tend to win in urban districts. All of them didn't want this tax. All of them talked about how, why are we funding public transportation in urban areas? This doesn't make any sense. Basically, the urban areas, your Portlands, your Salems, and everybody else, are subsidizing public transportation everywhere else in the state. These legislators who are fighting against this, I mean, I ask them, and I think about it all the time, like, do you not care about your local economies? Do you not want these people to have access to? You want affordable housing? Great. How are they going to get to work? They need something. They need to be connected with jobs and healthcare, all the things we talked about. Why aren't we? We should be saying, heck yes. Please get us more money because we can't afford it. If we had to stand up public transportation all by ourselves as rural counties, it could not happen.
Yeah,
Also,
that's a tough ask for
yeah.
people.
Ultimately, too, we could not fund even our own road maintenance
Hmm.
without that, without urban Oregonians putting so much money in the pot. So 46 cents is going to go into that pot we talked about, and it's going to get split 50 for the state, 50 for counties.
Hmm.
Not every penny that goes into the city and county bucket came from city and county taxpayers. Most of it came from people who live in Multnomah, Washington counties, all the way down I-5. Their money still went into this pot. Now, a lot of it goes back to them
Hmm.
because of that formula, but there's also a lot that goes to rural communities who could not afford to fix their roads or even maintain their roads. And by fix, I mean like in Oregon, like in Tillamook County last year, we had 2 or 3 roads blow out completely. We had one house. This is crazy. We had one house on Highway 22, which is the road that connects Hebo, which is in the south part of Tillamook County, over to Grand Ron, basically. The river shifted over
Hmm.
the years because trees fall down and it changes the way the water flows. It eroded out the support to a bridge that connected one house
Mm.
over the river to a road that then connected it to the highway. That was ultimately ODOT's bridge. Or the county's bridge. That was ultimately the county's bridge because of their obligation to make sure people are connected. It was going to be a couple of $1 million to fix the bridge. They didn't have the money. There was no money to fix that bridge. So we had a family who was going to lose their home because we didn't have the money to get the bridge. And when the county called ODOT and said, "Hey, is there any money?" ODOT looked under every couch cushion and said, "We can't get you the money because of all these different rules. We would need to change these rules to get it." Well, that didn't help a family who needed it right away. Ultimately, family, I don't know if the county ended up having to buy their house
Mm.
or if the state did or what happened there, but these are examples of where the cities and the counties just don't have the budgets to fix things, and there are so many bridges on Oregon's north coast. There are uh, thousands of miles of road. We can't afford to fix it. I drive just from my house to my office every day is 7 miles. If you count up the amount of money that it would cost to get there, it's tens of thousands, hundreds of thousands of dollars to build the road in the first place, then to maintain it. And the number of people that drive that road in a day, maybe a couple hundred total trips on that road every day. Compare that to, I don't know, I-405, or not even I-405, any like 185th in Hillsboro, tens of thousands of drivers a day
Hmm.
using that same stretch of pavement. Um, Rural Oregon would still be driving on dirt roads with not nearly over some wooden bridges to get where they need to go if it were not for us as a state working together to fund transportation. And so when we say there needs to be a 6 cents gas tax increase, it's not because anybody's getting rich off of it. It's because it is the only way we're going to keep Oregon's transportation network going. And so when the opponents want to roll this back through a ballot referendum,
Yeah.
that's fine. That's the democratic process, but it doesn't solve the problem. And now we're going to have, if they're successful, we'll have 9 more months for Oregonians to decide. Meanwhile, we'll have to lay off the ODOT workers. We'll have to possibly lay off city and county workers, right? Because they're not going to be getting money, which means our roads are going to fall into even worse repair. And if there's a major disaster, then on one of the roads, we won't be able to fix it. The Republicans didn't come forward with a plan. Well, they did. They did come forward with a plan. Their plan was to take all of the money in the major road repairs that we'd use to fix that bridge, to connect that house, and remove it. Take all that $500 million. Actually, it was just under. It was like $250 million total, but there were $500 million from the feds tied to it. We'd have to give the $500 million back to the feds, take the 250 and put it in the maintenance bucket. Now we can't fix the roads if they fail. There's no fixing the bridges. There's no fixing culverts. But we've got 250-ish million roughly to pay to keep the roads clean and safe. We still needed another 150 million. That was going to come from defunding public transportation. So now the economy starts to slow down because people can't get to work and to school, to healthcare, to jobs, so that we'd have enough money in the bucket. That was the Republican plan. And if we did that, well, then we wouldn't have to raise taxes 6 cents, $2.50 a gallon, right? The alternative, but I just didn't see how that was really feasible for some of our most rural communities, let alone our most urban communities.
Hmm.
And we have road closures every year, if there's a road slide South Highway 101, connect between Pacific City and Tillamook, they're not going to be able to get to the hospital. Number one. Number two, a lot of my employees, well, not a lot, some of my employees work in the south part of the county and want to come to work every day. That's the only road. If they missed a day of labor because they couldn't get in, for one of my employees, that is almost $200 for the day.
Yeah.
Would they rather spend $2.50 to make sure they can get to work, or would it be $200? And as a business owner, a good chunk of my patients are coming up that road. Now, if there's a road slide, road closure, whether it's snow, rock slide, culvert blown out, you name it, uh, that's tens of thousands of dollars in a day. That might be, if it's a week, it grows.
Hmm.
The economic impact was massive.
Yeah.
And so the ask of Oregonians is $2.50 a day, 6 cents per gallon. And it's not like we're excited about it, but when you think of the economic trade-offs, the pros and the cons, it makes complete sense. So that aside, kudos to the opponents, which are, I believe at this point, all Republicans who want to put it on the ballot, let voters talk about it. But I would say to them this: when will a voter, no matter what the tax is, ever vote yes on it? That would be like me asking people if they want to have a root canal.
Yeah.
Well, it depends. Do I have a toothache? No, nobody wants to do it. But ask voters this instead: do you want to have clean and safe roads. They're all going to say yes. And then ask them if the $2.50 per month, if the 6 cents per gallon made it so that those roads did stay open and drivable, and there was no other option, and you explained all the option to them, which is the job of lawmakers to try to understand, would you support it then? And I bet you dollars to donuts, most of them, enough, would say yes. And that is why we have a representative government. So while I'm all for democracy and let's give the information to the voters, we're not really giving them all the information. We're just saying, hey, do you want a 6 cent gas tax? Yes or no? And they're going to come to the ballot. There may be a little blurb in the voter's handbook. They're going to be like, I mean, I think this makes sense. Doesn't make sense. Then they're going to vote yes or no. We elect state representatives, we elect state senators to go to the Capitol and do the hard work of sitting there and digesting all that information, knowing the facts, understanding the implication, talking to people back in our districts, the businesses, the employees, the schools, the hospitals, and then making a vote, regardless of the political consequences. And when I see senators and representatives who decide to vote on something simply because they're afraid of the political consequences, or they want to use that as a political ammunition in the next election, regardless of what the impact is on people who need those things. That is where I feel like the real disservice is. And so, yes, they are going to, I think November 12th is the first day is the last day the governor has to sign the bill, which means they have a 2 or 3 day turnaround before they can start doing the referendum. And that gives them roughly 45-ish days or so to get the ballot, to get the signatures they need. And if they do, great. But then my question is, so then what? You know what they'll say? Oh, well, we'll just wait for the governor to call and ask us, what should we do? And again, we're going to have the same problem, the same facts: 78,000 miles of road, 1.5 billion gallons of fuel purchased, and we still need this much money to make it work. And what do you guys want to do? And they're going to come back and say, well, let's cut project labor agreements, or let's change campaign finance law, or let's defund public transportation. They're going to come up with a whole bunch of things, some related, some aren't related, for political reasons. And again, all of those have cost and trade-offs. So if they're successful, I think it's a real step backward for Oregon. I think what we came up with, I think, is a great compromise, whether they want to admit to it or not. And I'm hopeful that Oregonians see and trust that, which is a big ask for people of their politicians, that they did the hard work here and made up their mind, and not buy into the idea that somehow some union or some political ally outside of the building, was the one who secretly is rubbing their hands behind the scenes because they're going to get rich off of this. Like, that just doesn't exist, but it does make for good talking points and headlines.
Yeah, one that I'm glad you brought up, you kind of answered a bunch of my questions, but I was going to ask, and then I'll move on to some other stuff because
Sure.
there's a lot to talk about ODOT. But one thing that gets brought up a lot is, we talk about the urgency, like we've just been talking about for a long time, especially in rural communities. Um, and it just seems like something doesn't compute for me when, like you just mentioned, the governor's waiting to her literal last day to sign this
Yeah.
bill, when the whole argument for the past summer was we got to do this or people are going to get laid off. But she's spending all this time. I think she was like vacationing or something. But
She was in
so
Asia, I think.
yeah, it
Yeah.
just seems like if the urgency was a real issue, then she would have signed this thing a long time ago. But I'm just curious what you think
I
about
hear
that.
what you're saying, and I think that's one way to look at it, is to say, well, if it was such a big deal, why didn't you sign it day one? I think two things. Let's just acknowledge the elephant in the room, which is the politics.
Yeah.
The governor, the Democrats, the agencies all really understand that we needed this bill to pass, and that there really wasn't another solution. Nobody wants to raise taxes. I've never heard a Democrat or a Republican, in or out of the building, in public or behind closed doors, say, gosh, it'd be great if taxes were higher.
Right.
Like, it doesn't
It's like the
exist.
least popular
Right. Nobody
thing
wants to.
to.
They know it's going to make people upset. And they know how how passionately people distrust the government, politicians, and ODOT, right? So there's always that going on. And so the politics was, we know this solution's necessary. There's not really another good option. This is the best of the worst. So, um, the Republicans made it obvious right from the get-go they were going to refer it to the ballot. And the Democrats knew, and the governor knows, that if it goes back to the ballot and there's a delay, that's a real impact on Oregonians right when winter starts. And the only tool she has in her bucket right now is to take the full amount of time the Constitution allows her to sign the bill. Just like that same Constitution allows the opponents to refer it to
Right.
the
Yeah,
ballot.
and it is interesting. Yeah, like I don't know, people might think it's kind of gross, but as far as the game of politics, like you're saying, the Republicans are trying to take their full 90-day window, and she's also trying to take her full
She's trying,
window.
yeah, it's a little bit of
Is that
both.
kind of what you're saying?
Yeah,
Yeah.
and so I think your other question was like, does the oh, if it was such an emergency, why did she go on a trip and why not sign it right away? When July came, and that's the beginning of the biennium, when all the money's there, they're looking ahead, and they knew ahead of time that if that they were gonna have to make some cuts even before July 1st, and that's why they tried to get that bill passed by the end of June, because if they didn't authorize the spending or the budget for ODOT, they were going to need to make layoffs. And so immediately, as soon as the session ended, she's like, all right, we'll have layoffs at the end of July because I don't
Right.
see a path forward for us. But then the politicians talked and said, all right, let's have a special session and let's do a much smaller version. And we'll see if we can get you 6 cents a gallon to keep maintenance going. And she said, if we're going to do that, I'm basically going to take money that we were going to spend in the second half of the biennium, and we'll spend it now to keep those people employed, as long as we're going to have a special session and we think this is going to get passed. And so she was. It's like if you knew your boss is going to give you a Christmas bonus in December, and
Right.
it's
Right.
March, and you really want to build a swimming pool,
You're
for example.
spending that
You're like, all right,
money.
I'll spend December's money
Right.
now. But if
Right.
the boss came to you and said, "There's no Christmas bonuses this December," you're not going to build the Christmas. You're not going to build the swimming pool because you can't count on the money. That was a little bit of what was happening there. It's like I have the money as long as it's coming out of later parts of the budget. I'll do that now to keep people employed, and once the bill passed, once she had the ink had dried, or not even dry, well, dried on the printout, but she hasn't signed it. She knew the money was going to be there, just like the Christmas bonus was going to be there. She didn't have to do the layoffs. And now what's at question is she's already spent the money from the future because she wanted to try to keep people employed. If if this bill goes back to the ballot, now that money's been spent, she's going to have to make some real cuts and changes because there's no money there unless the legislature comes back together again at the end of 2025 after the ballot referendum and does something different. And so I think the governor's responding to and the Democratic leadership are responding to what's likely and also what the facts are in front of them. They can't just make money. They don't have a printing press. And so I think what you see is exactly that happening. It's not that it's not still an emergency. It's that she knows the money's going to be there. And the bill was as written wasn't even designed to go into effect until January 1st anyway, not even with the 90-day window.
Right.
It
Right.
said these taxes will take place on January 1st. So the way we even designed to give her the money was you don't get any money for the first 6 months of 25, but the money will start coming in 26. Now the Democrats have 45 days, their constitutional window to get the votes they need or the signatures they need to even put this to a vote with the Republicans. And if you ask them, I mean, they're so certain of it. They think 90% of voters are going to vote yes, or going to get the signatures, or, well, don't like the bill, which means they'll get the signatures. On one hand, they maybe feel confident that they're going to get them. On the other hand, I think it's a lot of work that they're going to have to do. And it's not that I think they're misguided or fools. I respect all my colleagues in the building. I just think on this issue that they're on the wrong side of it, and that we will, if they're successful in their signatures, it's going to create some real problems for Oregon transportation network. Now, maybe we get lucky, and this is the mildest winter that we've had in 100 years, and we all get through it, and it's great. I just wasn't willing to take that gamble, and neither were a lot of other Democrats in October or September that winter 25, 26 was going to be a breeze, or that winter 26, 27 was going to be a breeze, and we wouldn't need anything. Like, it just didn't make sense.
Yeah.
I'd rather make sure the money's there in case we need it. And if we don't, well, then uh, you, we may need it for the next winter when it's bad. I mean, who doesn't understand if you live in Oregon how nasty or weird the weather can get? Does
Yeah.
that help understand?
No,
Okay,
totally. Yeah.
all right.
Yeah. No, I appreciate you answering those. I I was thinking when you're talking now, just I guess a quick, if you want to say anything about it, like, would you support some kind of external or even, I guess, internal audit or any kind of audit for ODOT? Do you
Yeah,
think that's necessary?
absolutely.
Okay.
Yeah.
Yeah.
No, I think every agency, when you have public dollars involved, you have to demand the highest accountability and stewardship of those dollars. And does that mean that we're ever going to get it 100% right? I mean, it's a great North Star, but I don't think there's a way currently for us to make sure there's absolutely no waste, inefficiency. I think we can do a really good job of trying to get fraud out of the system. But it's still going to be a little bit there. You have contractors, and once the money leaves and goes to outside parties, it gets really, really hard to start auditing and managing what's happening with those public dollars. But to the extent of how are we spending it, how are we approving projects, etc., I think there's a lot we can do there, and we should be, and I think we are. And some of the tools in House Bill in 3961, the bill that passed for the transportation bill, increases some of the
Supposed to help
accountability.
with
Yeah.
that, supposedly. Okay. Um, Let me see here. Yeah, I wanted do you want to say anything about, you mentioned your bill for primary open primaries.
Yeah.
Is there anything else in this upcoming short session that you want to talk about?
You know, we have a we have a big problem in front of us, and that is the budget. Because of HR1, the big beautiful bill, in that bill, there are some tax cuts coming from the federal government. The federal government is no longer going to tax tips for up to a certain range. I think it's the first 25. I think if you make less than $25,000 a year, I might be a little bit off on that, or less, you won't have to pay taxes on tips. And no tax on overtime. And I think there's a window of how much overtime. So it can't be unlimited overtime, but the first X dollars of overtime aren't going to get taxed.
And that's lost revenue for Oregon.
It's lost revenue for the feds, and it does end up being lost revenue for Oregon. The other big cut is there's some big deductions coming for small and large businesses. When you take all of those deductions for businesses and all of those reductions in tax revenue coming from the no tax on tips, no tax on overtime, that all trickles down to the state, because the state's tax return, and we're only one of 5 states that does this, is directly connected to the federal tax return. Meaning, your taxable income on your federal income tax return is roughly your taxable income on your state income tax return. We just tax it a little. There's a lower rate, so you pay a little different amount. Because you get all these big deductions at the federal level, now you're going to get those same ones at the state level, and because of that, we are $400 million in the hole. But Oregon's constitution requires us to have a balanced budget. We can't run deficits like the federal government. We have to make up $400 million. So that's the first big thing that we have to figure out. Where are we going to find 400 million? Ultimately, we're asking the agencies to make cuts, 2.5 to 5% cuts. Now, some of those cuts they're going to be across the board. I had one call the other day from an agency. I won't say who. There are two major, because it's not public yet, but there are two major installations, facilities, structures that employ 100 people or so that are in the district. They're going to have to be closed if those cuts go into place, and they're important, kind of vital things that we'll have to shift the burden
In
somewhere
your
else
district
in the
or
district. Yeah.
okay, yeah.
So all sorts of cuts like that are coming potentially. We have got to figure out, how to save some money for every agency that's looking at that, whether it's transportation or well, not really transportation, because they're funded by the gas tax unless we lose the gas tax. But take Medicaid, for example, in healthcare. The way we fund healthcare for the poorest among us, which is those that make between 12,000 and sometimes between or up to $80,000 a year, depending on how many people are in their family, because it's based on the federal poverty level per the federal government's own rules, is for every dollar we put into a savings account from the state, the federal government puts in between $3 to $9.
Hmm.
So we take all of that money together and we use that money to pay providers to provide treatment for the patients and the people of Oregon. We also put some money, about $1 billion, just over $1 billion. I think it's 1.02 billion in 24, in a program called Healthier Oregon. That's state-only dollars. That goes to cover primarily undocumented immigrants, but also other immigrants and other people who don't qualify. Think of like a senior citizen who wants dental care, but can't get it through Medicare and doesn't qualify for other Medicaid. Like we have their own little rules to help all those people out, but there are a large chunk of undocumented immigrants in that pot. But for every dollar we put in, we get $3 to $9 over here. For it, as we start looking at the budget and we start having to cut money, every dollar we pull out from Medicaid from the state budget is giving up $3 to $9 to the feds, which means we're not just losing $1 for healthcare, we're losing $10 for healthcare.
Mm-hmm.
And that adds up really, really fast. Our Oregon hospitals, there's 62 of them. 25 of them are in communities that are very rural. Our Oregon hospitals in the first quarter of 2025 lost $300 million. That is the biggest loss in more than a decade. And in large part, it's because the costs have climbed so fast over the last 4 years, since 2020, that hospitals and doctors' offices and dentist offices can't afford to pay for materials, supplies, and people. So they're laying people off to try to keep up with this. And the more people we lay off out of hospitals, the less access to care we have. And the state at the same time has said, hey, you know what, we want to make sure there's patient safety, and there's national standards too that say for every patient, for every nurse, you can only have X number of patients. So if you have less nurses, you can have less patients, even if you have available beds. We've made it harder for hospitals to do what they do. We've made it more expensive. And their fees haven't kept up for a few reasons. One, Medicaid hasn't really increased their fees very much over the last 5 years. So hospitals are getting, not enough to cover the cost. Secondly, the money that we do give to hospitals only pays really for 60-ish% of the actual cost of giving care. So if you go to the emergency room, you broke your arm, you need to get it set, that bill might be normal. That might cost the hospital before they're not going to make a profit on this. That might cost hospital $3,000. Medicaid's going to pay 60% of that, so $1,800. So they're losing $1,200 on every patient, and it's getting worse and worse because those costs aren't keeping up. So we are undercutting Medicaid through some of our policy decisions, and we either have to kick people off of Medicaid, which we can't really do because the feds didn't change the rules on who gets to qualify for Medicaid. We still have to cover them.
Mm-hmm.
We have to cut rates. So we'll look at that. That means less money going to hospitals, which is going to accelerate their death spiral. When you've got hospitals like Seaside, which has Providence in Seaside, they're closed their maternity ward. You have the dialysis clinic in Tillamook had to close a year and a half ago because they couldn't pay the bills. You've got the Bay Area Hospital down in Coos Bay that will be insolvent in 3 to 4 years unless things turn around. They get some funding from the state. They get some funding from some other sources. You have hospitals all over. And when you lose access to that care, moms in Seaside now have an hour drive to get to a hospital if they can, if there's enough room for them there.
Mm-hmm.
Coos Bay, 5-hour drive for people who live south of Coos Bay, not down near California, to go to Lane County to go to the hospital in Eugene.
Mm-hmm.
That's insane. And so we have this huge budget shortfall of $400 million. We have to make cuts, which means we're going to put a lot more pressure on rural healthcare. And but then we'll slowly try to get back to neutral. And why do I point out healthcare? It's because healthcare makes up 30% of our budget. We cannot seriously talk about making cuts to a $140 billion budget, and when 30% of it's healthcare, and not talk about healthcare. And then you've got all the other ones, childcare. I was at a facility last week. Its main job is to be out a halfway house or a treatment facility for girls between the ages of 11 and 18 who are victims of sex trafficking. Their budget is in the millions of dollars a year to be able to take care of those girls. Those types of things, like all of those things, we have to put out on the table and say, which can we afford to cut, which can't we? We need 3,000 more beds for substance abuse disorders in the state of Oregon.
Mm-hmm.
And we're going to cut funding for healthcare. The reason why we don't have those 3,000 beds is because we can't afford it. And now we're going to make it even harder to afford it. So that's a huge problem coming in the short session. We're going to have to figure out where that money is going to come from. And now we've just kind of stabilized the patient, but we're not taking care of any of the priorities that we need to really solve the problems in Oregon because of these cuts. And that's just the tip of the iceberg. because even though we're going to be short 400 million, if we don't figure out a way to increase revenue, it's going to be even larger in the next biennium because of those cuts. But also looming are in that same bill, HR1, the costs to administer Medicaid, right? Because the states administer. We get the money, the feds give us the money like dad gives us an allowance.
Right.
And then we have to do all the things to make sure Medicaid works. People get enrolled. We still verify that they're eligible. We process, we give money to insurance companies to process claims. That burden has now gone up for the state, so we have to do more of it. Which means we need to hire more people at the state. So just at a time when we're talking about, well, maybe we can pare back employees and make agencies' budgets smaller. How do we do that when we now have to hire more people? And so you've got that coming. Same for SNAP benefits, which have been a lot in the news right now. The federal government pays 100% of the money that goes onto people's SNAP cards, but they pay the states to run the program again. Here's some money, Oregon, make sure people get their SNAP benefits, that they're eligible, et cetera. And they are now saying you're going to have to do more frequent eligibility checks. You have to bring your payment error rate down, which is not fraud. Payment error rate is when.
Yeah, I was actually talking to an accountant at a libertarian meeting like a week ago, and she was explaining the error. Yeah, it's not necessarily fraud, but it's just incidents that are
Yeah.
not ideal with those type of
Yeah, it
payments
could be you didn't get your paperwork
those
in
type of
time, but you got
accounts. Yeah,
paid.
yeah.
Now we have to take that
Or
back,
you give too
or
much
you
or
give too
stuff
much,
like that. Yeah.
right? So we have to bring that down, which is good. We should be bringing that down. We need
Yeah,
more
more
efficiency.
efficient. Yeah.
But to do that, we have to hire more people, invest in more technology in order to be able to do the things the federal government says to do. Great, let's do it. But they're giving us less money to do it with, which means it has to come out of our pockets, which really means it has to come out of the taxpayers' pockets. So you have all these in costs that are going to increase things. At the same time, people are going to get kicked off of SNAP because they're not going to be eligible anymore for a variety of reasons. They're going to get kicked off of Medicaid for the same reason, because now they're just through all the work requirement new rules and frequency of eligibility. We estimate we're going to lose almost 200,000 people off of Medicaid. These people will still need health care. These people who lost their SNAP benefits will still need food. The people who need health care are not going to be able to go to their primary care doctors anymore, where it costs less to get treatment. They're going to go straight to the emergency room, where it costs 5 to 7 times to
Right.
provide
I
the
know that's the
treatment.
big argument of,
Yeah.
the immediate care is ultimately way more expensive
Way
than the
more
preventive
expensive.
and
And the hospitals will no longer be able to bill Medicaid because they were kicked off. So now the hospitals will try to bill the patient. The patients can't afford it. So what are the hospitals going to do? They're going to have to write it off. So now they're writing off care that they still have to provide because people are still going to come. It's 5 to 7 times what it would have cost to have sent them if they come in earlier. So it's going to be even more expensive for the hospitals on top of the charity they're already doing by law, they have to do.
right.
So we've now put hospitals in a spot where they're not even on the ropes, they're out of the ring. And somebody's beating them over the head with a metal chair at this point. That is the situation that we put people in. And SNAP benefits are the same. People are now not having SNAP benefits. They're still going to try to eat. They're just not going to pay their other bills, right? They're not going to make the car payment if they have one. They're going to be rent on their late. They're not going to buy new clothes if they need them. Car repairs are going to go deferred because people will eat before all of that other
Right.
stuff.
Yeah.
And we estimate a loss to Oregon over the next 10 years of $15 billion. That would normally flow into healthcare facilities and grocery facilities. And 80% of that money for SNAP, for example, goes to small businesses, not the big grocers like Walmart's and Fred Meyer's. A lot does go to that. But when you look at the number of places, 80% of the places the money goes to are small businesses. The trickle effect to our economy will be huge. So we talked about a $4.3 billion tax through the transportation package, which is true, right? There's going to be all those different buckets, and that's spread out over 10 years. And that is a big ask of the taxpayers. But we're also going to be having to come up with $15 billion, a loss in the economy, which is a loss of tax revenue, which is a loss of income for people, which means people are going to get laid off. The whole thing is connected like a spider web. And if that doesn't terrify you as to what's coming, I don't know what will, except for if you're 60 years old and you don't qualify for Medicaid, but you do, and you don't, so you have to go to the ACA marketplace to get an insurance plan. Right now, and for the last several years, you've been spending $600 a month for a couple to have health insurance when they're in their 60s, when arguably they're going to start needing it the most of any other time in their life. And their premiums are going to go from $600 a month to $2,700 a month overnight. That is $2,000, $25,000. We're talking about a $2.50 tax from the fuel tax going up that gets people to their jobs so they can make money. Now people, whether they need the healthcare or not, are going to be spending $25,000 a year, $2,000 a month because of what's coming in HR 1. And when you add all of that up, it is like to pick up Mount McKinley or Mount Everest and just drop it on the state of Oregon. That is what the lift is looking like. And we will figure it out, but it won't be without some trade-offs and some cuts. And that's kind of what concerns me. I mean, that is what should be on every legislator's mind. Every agency's mind, every member of the public's mind as we go into short session and the next 24 months. And what we see happening in the federal government right now as they haggle back and forth, and we see the president of the United States, doing whatever he's doing with SNAP benefits, which boggles my mind, and those impacts, and why the Democrats are asking for the ACA subsidies to not go away. I get that they were supposed to sunset, but they made that decision in 2020 before we saw the massive inflation that was going to come.
Mm-hmm.
And if we could get in our Wayback Machine and go back to 2020 and say, hey guys, this is what things are going to look like in 2025, politicians would make a different decision in 2020. Politicians would have made a different decision about transportation in 2017 if we could go back in our Wayback Machine. So it's helpful to look into the past, but it's not really helpful in the sense of how do we make policy decisions about the facts today and what's happening tomorrow.
So that'll be the most of the focus. It sounds like of the
Absolutely.
yeah.
Yep.
Yeah. I mean, there's a couple thoughts I had in there. I don't know, because I've heard that I feel like people would push back who like say that Oregon's been taking, maybe make the argument that Oregon hasn't been the most fiscally responsible state and has been
Sure.
taking way more federal dollars than it pays out. And so this is just a consequence of that. And I was also curious, like, do you see? I don't see this ever happening in Oregon, but do you see like a sales tax on the horizon because of that, the stuff you just talked about?
Yeah, maybe, but that would definitely be a taxpayer decision, right? Like
I mean, it'd be a
a
huge
voter decision.
change for
Yeah, it'd be a
Oregon.
huge decision.
Yeah.
Oregon sends $42 billion to the federal government. That comes from you, me, and the businesses. That's it. But we get back $100 billion.
Yeah. And that's what I'm saying. It
Yeah.
seems kind of like
And
an
yeah,
imbalance
it
to
does.
begin with, but
It's definitely an imbalance. It's because of the way the system is set up. So you get taxpayers from New York and California that are paying them more than they're getting back. That's coming over here to Oregon. I mean, in some ways that's good. It's like the transportation thing, rural
right,
Oregonians
yeah.
getting the benefits they need. I would say that, when you look at SNAP benefits, for example, and Medicaid, Oregon has 12.5% of its population.
I was going to ask you that why do you think that is that
Yeah.
Oregon has such this high
Well, the
reliance
national
on?
average is 12.2%. Oregon's at 12.5. The lowest state in the union is New Hampshire. It's right around 6% as poor. California and Louisiana, one red state, one blue state, are the highest, near 17% of the population is poor. When you look at the why is now out of all those states, Oregon has the most people enrolled. So we haven't increased the number of people who are poor. It's still 12% of the population.
Yeah, I meant just SNAP specifically.
Yeah,
like
SNAP.
It's like 1 in 6, I think, in Oregon. Yeah.
Oregon has done a much better job of connecting people to the SNAP benefits, right? They have better outreach, better facilities to help people get the money that's already there from the federal government. And so when we say, why are there so many people on SNAP in Oregon? It's not because we have more poor people than everybody else. We have 12%. We're at the national average, but we have done a much better job of connecting them together, saying, hey, did you know you can get SNAP benefits? Right. And this is how you do it. Here's how you fill out the paperwork.
Awareness and
awareness. That's the main reason why we have so many.
Okay.
And so when we have cuts, it's our poor people suffer just as much as everybody else is poor, but we had more people who were benefiting from the system because they were connected appropriately, and now they're not. And when they since 2020, they've gone from getting $130 a month in food benefits to $180, so a $50 increase. Minimum wage has gone up $4 per hour in the same period of time. If you're working 20 hours a week, and you're getting $1,000 a week, or you're getting paid $4 more an hour, that's 800. That's 800 more bucks there, plus um, you've got $50 over here, so about 850 in expenses. But when you look at how much food's increased, which is about $60 to $70 a month per person, utilities has increased, rent's gone up $400, gas prices have just moved $28 per month in the over that same amount of time. That a person who, and then you've got clothing and daycare and the rest of it's all gone up too. People in that situation who need all of those resources are still drowning and treading water. And if we're going to cut SNAP benefits, cut Medicaid, and a lot of those other things that are hanging out there, not only are they not making it now, it's going to be even harder then. And
Hmm.
so we need to make sure they're connected, because if not, the costs are still there. They still need food, healthcare, clothing. They still need to get from A to B. And if we're going to cut public transportation, then how are these people who, can barely survive as is now going to get where they need to go?
Hmm. Yeah. One thing I don't know if I don't really know how this works in the legislature, but one thing I hear from people all the time is the utility increases every year.
Yeah.
And I know as a PGE customer here, uh, I would say 3 years ago or so, my bills in the winter went from like $90, $100 to like $200 or $300. And I'm
Hmm.
just, does the legislature, who approves? I know like the state approves those increases every
Yeah.
year. Is that?
Yeah. The state does improve them. Some of it's driven by green energy costs,
Yeah.
because the utility companies do need to have a portfolio of different ways to get their energy. And so it does include some green energy. And for those that can't, don't have a green energy profile, then we have the climate protection program, which carbon tax credits, money moving around, there's some cost
Right.
there.
Right.
But by and large, what's really driving it is just the cost of it's the cost of energy. When you look at something like just gasoline prices, for example, and it's real similar to the natural gas and the electric market. We have $4.09 a gallon right now is what the price is today in Oregon, and on average, and it changes every day. More than 60% of that is the cost of crude oil and refining.
Hmm.
And then you add on things like retail distribution. Finally, you get to taxes, and it's 58 cents between the federal and the state. And then you've got about a 10-cent sliver of that is going to be for environmental stuff. But the biggest share of energy that drives the energy cost, like whether it's fuel or whether it's electricity and natural gas, is the cost of getting the resource,
Hmm.
not all the things we've done to it. Yes, we've done some things to it over the last decade or two to make it a little more expensive at the margins. But in 2020, when gas plummeted to $2.22 a gallon in Oregon, at that same time, crude oil was trading at negative $50 a barrel.
Hmm.
Only time in history that that's happened. People were paying you to take their oil from them because
Right.
they couldn't take delivery of it. And now oil's back up. And the Pacific, the other thing that's driving energy prices on the West Coast is we are geographically essentially isolated from the rest of the country because of the mountain ranges. So, like, our oil comes from Alaska by ship,
Mm.
which is very
It's a lot
expensive.
more
It's also
expensive. Yeah.
heavy, heavy crude, which costs even more to move. And we get some money that comes up from the south as well. And then we get a little bit that comes by rail. It is the most expensive place in the country to move, other than maybe Hawaii, to move fuel
Hmm. Just
or energy to,
logistically.
just
Yeah.
logistically.
Yeah.
So unless we remove the mountains or find an oil reserve supply somewhere locally, it's just always going to be expensive because crude prices are set globally.
Right. Yeah.
And so are other natural resource. I mean, so are other energy
Yeah.
prices,
They're huge
right?
markets. Yeah.
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 And so what really is driving the cost are the markups in order to get the energy where we need it. And Oregon can't change that. Even if we built more refineries, it would help a little bit because now we've got some competition on the refining costs. But as far as getting the crude to where it needs to be, or the natural gas, or electrical power through, I mean, obviously we have water and wind and all those different things,
Yeah.
but it's not gonna change, and that's what's driving the cost. It's just the market forces are driving the costs.
Okay. Yeah, I always say I would love to see nuclear. I know a lot of
Oh yeah,
people
that'd be great.
it seems like the cheapest option, but there's some resistance out there. Okay. Is there anything else you want to say before I move into the
No,
dentist
no,
question?
let's keep, yeah, whatever you got next.
uh, If there's anything you want to say, I just wrote down dentist questions and secrets. Um,
Sure.
who does your dentistry, first of all?
Oh, well, I
You do
work
your
with
own?
3 other dentists.
Okay.
And so
You're
if
part
I
of a
ever need
group of,
any, I haven't
yeah.
had a cavity in 10, 15 years. And the last time I went to a friend, when I needed something, went to a friend who went to dental school with, get my teeth cleaned at the office. So yeah.
Yeah. Okay. Yeah. I mean, I guess obviously you're in the best position to keep your teeth
Yeah.
in good shape.
Hmm.
What are some of the worst things for teeth?
Smoking is absolutely the worst thing for your teeth.
Mm,
It does the most damage. When I see 20-year-olds coming in, it's not because they're drinking energy drink. I mean, 20-year-olds who are going to lose all their teeth or a bunch of teeth. It's generally not because they're drinking lots of energy drinks, soda, and sugar, although that does hurt your teeth. It is smoking that does by far the worst. And the main reason is two. One, smoking leaves a sticky residue all over your teeth, and then you
okay.
eat or
Yeah.
drink,
Right.
and now it's acting like the world's strongest duct tape, holding stuff onto your teeth,
Okay.
which is accelerating tooth decay. Plus, it dries out your mouth
It
and
collects
saliva.
that plaque
Yeah,
quicker and
and saliva normally balances out and washes off some of that. You're not getting enough saliva, and then you're killing your gums. So the smoke is basically shrinking the blood supply in your gum tissue, and that's making your teeth. You're losing bone. Your teeth are getting looser. So by the time I get somebody in their 20s, 30s, 40s who's been a chain smoker, I mean they're toothless at that point. There's not much they can else they can do. Other than that, not brushing is a big deal, obviously.
right.
But if you're eating candy and you're drinking soda or coffee at a normal level, maybe you have a cup of coffee every day or a soda or an energy drink or something. That's okay as long as you're brushing and you're being responsible. But if you're not brushing and you're doing that, or if you're overdoing one of those things,
Mm.
you're hammering your teeth. And it's not just those things. Like even Dasani water is acidic enough to cause decay.
Okay. Okay.
So most of the stuff we eat and drink is pretty acidic, and so you really need to be brushing, even if you're on a no sugar diet or a no soda diet. Ultimately, yes, your risks of decay and tooth loss are a lot lower because you're not eating and drinking that stuff, but there's enough in there to cause some damage to your teeth, and those are the primarily the biggest
For
reasons.
sure, yeah. Yeah, that's what I was. I don't know. I love learning about this stuff
Mhm.
because the acidic stuff was what I was curious about. But if you brush twice a day, that kind of takes care of that
You're brushing,
typically. Yeah.
the number one thing that causes cavity is acid. That's at the end of the day, when you look at the biology and the physiology and the physics of it, it's acid. It's not plaque. You could put bacteria on your teeth all day long. It's not sugar. You can put that
Hmm.
on your teeth too, but plaque by itself won't do anything. It just sits on your teeth and looks gross and smells bad.
Yeah.
But the minute you eat anything, it's got sugar in it, which is just about everything, whether it's table sugar or natural sugars from fruit or
It,
sugar in milk.
yeah. It really
th-
is in everything. Yeah.
that is what the bacteria eat.
Okay.
And so they're
It's like
absorbing the
fuel for
sugar
them. Yeah.
and then they run it through the normal processes of anaerobic and aerobic respiration that we all do. And their byproduct is acid. And they poop it out all over your teeth, and that burns and weakens your tooth over and over and over again. And the bacteria go into it, and then they make it deeper and deeper. And so simply just brushing twice a day, just removing whatever plaques accumulated, it's not there to absorb the sugar. Now you could, if there were no bacteria, you could eat as much sugar as you wanted, and it wouldn't do anything to your teeth either. Now take away both of those things, bacteria gone, sugar gone. And let's just say all you're now doing is drinking diet soda, for example. There's no sugar in diet soda, but the thing's loaded with phosphoric acid.
Mm.
Now you're basically doing the work of the bacteria for them. Now you're bathing your teeth in sugar. And so you will see people who are really heavy soda drinkers, despite having the best oral hygiene possible, basically just substituting bacteria and sugar for no sugar but acid. And so what you're really looking at is just be normal, brush your teeth once to twice a day, ideally twice, but um, limit your sugar intake so you're not fueling the bacteria, and then be careful with your acidic drinks so that you're not eroding your teeth any faster than they're supposed to. And if you do those 3 things and go see your dentist regularly just to make sure nothing's creeping up, you're going to have great, healthy teeth for most of your life, if not all of your life.
Okay.
Yeah.
I love learning about this stuff. And I did. I haven't smoked for years, but I did smoke through most of my 20s. And every time I go to the dentist, which I didn't a lot in my 20s, but he'd be like, I've seen people with like had to cut their tongues out and all this stuff
Yeah. Oh, the
because of
cancer
that.
risks. Yeah, I didn't even talk about that,
And
but yeah, those are real.
but yeah, it grosses me out now thinking about it because you just like, you smoke all day and then you go in there and it's like a disgusting mouth. Yeah, that's kind of all the dentist questions I think I
All
had.
right.
I think I was just thinking of one, but I think it's slipped away. All right, let me get into some of these goofy ones, and a lot of these are gross food related. So,
Sure.
and it's fine if you.
Okay.
Do you like Doritos?
I do.
Do you have a favorite Dorito
Just
kind?
nacho cheese. Yeah, I say nacho cheese is my favorite, but I do like Cool Ranch.
Okay.
Yeah.
What's the on a 1 to 10? How bad is that for your teeth?
Oh gosh, not that bad. I mean, they're corn tortillas, and you got some cheese, and you do have a little bit of sugar, but the sugar quantity of Doritos is pretty dang low,
Okay.
so not too bad.
It's mainly the stuff you're just saying, those 2 or 3 factors.
Yep.
Okay. Um, I know this is like Halloween's over, but do you like candy corn?
No, can't stand candy corn. Never liked it. Too
Okay.
sweet.
Yeah, and most people hate it. I enjoy it a little bit as I get older. I can only eat like a couple
My wife
pieces,
really
but
likes it,
um,
and so do the kids. But I'm more of a Jelly Belly jelly bean fan.
okay.
Yeah.
I have a good friend who loves Jelly Bellies and went to the
Mm.
factory and all that stuff
Oh
a
yeah, I've
bunch of
been to the
times.
factory. It's that and right. Ronald Reagan used to have them on his desk, and yeah,
Okay,
he
yeah.
did. He was a big Jelly Belly fan.
Do you like Taco Bell? Do you Taco
I
Bell?
do love Taco Bell. I love just a basic hard shell taco, but my stomach doesn't love Taco Bell, and so
It's a gamble, kind
it's always a gamble.
of.
Yep.
Okay. And that's kind of your favorite item.
The hard shell taco
Yeah.
with just regular beef, whatever that is, if it is beef taco, yeah.
Okay. Um, do you have some favorite? I haven't done this in a while. This question in a while. Do you have some favorite nuts? I used to ask people nut rankings.
Yeah, pistachios, cashews, and are my favorites. Although a good flavored almond is pretty good too, and
Okay.
then peanuts are fine, but they're like at the bottom of the list.
Okay.
I don't generally like walnuts. I think they're kind of there's something about them. I don't hate them, but they don't do much for me. And but yeah, cashews, pistachios, and almonds.
Okay. I like them. I love pistachios too.
Yeah.
Do you have a favorite sushi roll? Do you like sushi?
I don't mind sushi. I didn't used to like it. My wife introduced me to it, and I do like kind of a warmer sushi
Mm.
roll, usually with some shrimp. I don't mind a little bit of crab, avocado, rice. I don't mind some roe on the top of it, but I don't really love just uncooked salmon on my
Yeah.
sushi roll.
Like
So
something a little more cooked.
yeah.
Okay. Um, it's got a couple more here. Is there an animal or creature you're most afraid of? Most people always say bugs or snakes or something like that. Or
I used to dream a lot about, if I had a bad dream, it was the snake that was coming after me. I think honestly, the two animals that would terrify me the most would be either a cougar or a bear in the wild.
yeah,
I think,
it'd be pretty
yeah,
terrifying.
I
Yeah.
think they can just like I feel like most of the time they run away and they're skittish, but they can all of a sudden become aggressive.
hmm
And I don't know that I don't. Well, I have no chance against a bear or a cougar. I think a cougar, if you had a weapon on you, maybe, but a bear, goodbye.
Yeah.
And I watched that movie, was it The Revenant?
Oh
Where,
yeah, the bear
yeah,
fight.
DiCaprio gets
Yeah.
attacked by that bear, and that was okay. I mean, I know people sometimes survive that, but
Right.
no, those two would, if I was out in the well, and sometimes when I go out to get the mail or the garbages at night, I always think, gosh, that could be a cougar, like just waiting until I turn
Right.
my back. So
Yeah.
yeah, for whatever, those two are not my favorite.
Okay. Um, do you believe in aliens, Bigfoot, or ghosts?
I do believe in ghosts and not Bigfoot. Aliens, I think there's extraterrestrials out there. There's alien life forms somewhere out there.
Yeah.
I don't think they've made it to Earth, but maybe, and I
Maybe
just don't know about it.
microbial or something at
Yeah,
least. Yeah.
but but ghosts, yeah, I do. I think there's some ghosts out there.
Okay. If I've asked people this, but they don't know. Have you seen this comet thing that's been?
Oh yeah, the one that's getting bigger and bigger and
Yeah.
coming right at
I
us.
just read this morning it turned from the sun and like the tail like changed. Like they can't figure out what's going on with
They
it.
said it's like 12 miles long. But the thing is, yeah, it's like not behaving
It's doing
normally.
weird stuff.
And
Yeah.
like a comet doesn't just turn, but
Right.
also, so people have said, well, maybe it's a spaceship. But What spaceship is 12
I
miles
know it's
long?
gigantic, right?
Yeah,
Yeah.
that's massive. So, and they think it'll be here soon or close soon, so they'll be able to look at it. So I don't. I have heard about this. I forget what it's called, but I just heard about it maybe 2 weeks ago too. So it's,
Yeah, it is interesting.
yeah, yeah.
Yeah. Okay, I'll just give people a chance. Is there a local business or restaurant you want to shout out in your district that's a real favorite of yours?
Oh my gosh. Well, I mean, Tillamook Creamery is a huge,
Oh yeah, of course.
cool thing for people if they're coming out to the coast. They have obviously the ice cream there and the cheese that you can stop and get, plus some really good food, and you get to see how the cheese is
Yeah, the
made.
whole factory. Yeah.
Yeah, and they just redid that in the last 5 years. Other businesses, I mean, like I said, we have 27 towns along the coast. So no matter where you go, you're likely to find some good food or beer. There's Pelican Brewery out
Right,
there, one
right.
of the best locally brewed beers in the world. And we have that right on the coast. Fort George up in Astoria is another
Mm.
good brewery. And then you've got a bunch of different ones spotted along the coast. Food wise, in Tillamook, I really think Werner's Beef and Brew has done a great job. They've
Okay.
got good local food there. Down in the south part of the county, my gosh, there's so many restaurants. The Meridian's good if you want some fine dining, or
Is Moe's in your district?
Moe's is. There's a couple of
Okay.
Moe's. There's Mo. I think the main Moe's is in Lincoln City, but there
Okay.
are some Moe's
Yeah.
up in Astoria. You've got Cannery Pier has a hotel. I mean, has a fantastic restaurant. Fix is a great place in Astoria to get some a drink. Cannon Beach has got the Pelican has some restaurants there as well, but but just they have a lot of local food, seafood. You've got in Tillamook County, it's the Pacific Seafood has a an oyster slash seafood place where you can get great fish and chips
Mm.
right there. And then I mean, there's some. I feel like I'm leaving out so many good ones at this point, but yeah, up and down the coast, every little village from Manzanita to
Yeah.
Tillamook, and then up to Gearhart and beyond, you'll find some really good food, whether it's breakfast or fine dining. So yeah, some pretty cool stuff. And whoever I forgot, I feel bad, but no,
No,
there's too many to call
it's a
out.
great list.
Yeah.
Yeah. I was gonna say I used when I mentioned I used to do horse races. I used to do. You probably know the pig and Ford races that they do at Tillamook
Yeah. Yeah.
Fair.
Yeah. Yeah.
I've told people about that and they don't know what the hell I'm
Oh my
talking
gosh,
about,
it's
but
crazy.
yeah, it's really fun. Their whole fair is
Yeah,
usually
it's a
fun,
good fair.
but I used to go there in the Rendezvous Lounge. I don't know if that's
Oh yeah,
still
it's still
there,
there.
but yeah, they have
Yeah,
good like
Rendezvous is
steaks
still
and
there.
stuff. And
Yeah, they do have good steaks. There's Rodeo has good steaks. Warner's has good. It's honestly difficult to find a steak house in Tillamook County other than maybe right in Tillamook and then down in Pacific City. But
because it's all seafood mostly.
it's
Yeah,
yeah, it is. It's yeah, definitely.
cool man. Yeah, and I'll just give people a chance to shout out before we wrap up. Like, yeah, I'm guessing you're up for reelection next year.
Yeah, running as a Democrat and up for reelection.
Is there a website or something you want to point people to?
Yeah, to cyrusfororegon.com. I also write a weekly newsletter that anybody can subscribe to. It's not like hey, this is what I did this weekend. I tend to focus it on a particular issue that Oregon is facing, like whether it's transportation or SNAP benefits, and it's through Substack.
Okay, yeah, you have a
And
Substack, yeah.
so, yeah, it's you can Google me. I mean, Substack Cyrus Javadi, but it's called a point of personal privilege, which is a phrase that we'll say in the Capitol when we want to talk about something that is maybe not necessarily off topic, but we're going to take a little bit more time to discuss something in
Okay,
depth.
you say that and then you have some
Yeah,
time.
so if we're in a hearing and typically there's an order, everybody gets their chance, but the chair of the committee might say, I'm going to take a point of personal privilege here, and I want to talk a little bit more about such and such a thing. And so it's a way to highlight and shine a light on things that are important to the committee or to the member. And so this was my way of saying, hey, these are the things that I think are important for Oregon or our district. And then people kind of weigh in. And then, my Facebook page, Cyrus for Oregon, I put posts up every day and talk about everything from local to national politics and good and bad and ugly. And I try to keep it as unpartisan as I can, more of a centrist look at it. I do obviously have some of my personal politics and biases, and I make those pretty clear when they're there. But I try to respond and weigh in with people and let them and try to interact and engage so they feel like they've got a connection to lawmakers that sometimes feel like they're out of reach, and so I like to be
Yeah,
available.
awesome.
Yeah,
Well, yeah, thanks so much for coming
yeah, I
today,
bet.
and yeah, you're always welcome back. We should do it again
Hey,
sometime.
thanks. Anytime.